That's us, guys. Welcome to the first episode of Young Buck on Switch TV. This is my first podcast, Matt's first podcast, and Zak's first podcast. So bear with us when we find out how we're going to do and learn the ropes, but we're interested and super excited to get going and learn about what Zak has to say. So welcome, Zak.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
It's going to be good.
Awesome. How about you introduce yourself? Let the listeners know who you are, what you do, what you're about.
Amazing. My name's Zak Devey. I am a advocate for creativity and creative equity, most importantly. So I co-found a charity called Youth Arts New Zealand. We hope to create creative opportunities for young people who have something that they want to express, be it creative open mic nights, youth-centered concerts, public art exhibitions focusing on young people's work. I was a creative who wanted to jam and write all day long, but I knew deep down there was this unsettling feeling, I have to get a professional job, I have to do something that's going to sustain me, right? So the aim of the game for us is to get rid of that ultimatum, create enough opportunities for creativity in NZ so people don't feel like they have to choose one or the other.
Mm-hmm. So a bit of background on Zak. So what are you doing now? You're at the University of Auckland.
Yeah, man.
Right?
Yep.
Awesome.
I study psychology and sociology.
Mm-hmm.
I got one more year to go, and then I'm free like a bird.
You're a bit of a humble character. Tell us, what are the big awards that you've won in the last couple of years, and talk yourself up a little bit.
Well, that's not the humble thing. Last year, I was fortunate enough to be awarded Art Student of the Year at the University of Auckland.
Congratulations.
I'm extremely fortunate to have been able to travel to India and Japan this year as part of, firstly, a Prime Minister's Scholarship-funded program and an NZIIU funded program to teach empowerment programs in Japan. Later this year, I'm heading to Shanghai on a second Prime Minister's Scholarship, which will be amazing. I'll be doing a mental health placement there for 3 months, which speaks to another passion of mine, which is culturally conscious mental health practice. So New Zealand is a place where, as I'm sure you guys know, our mental health statistics are absolutely shocking. But one of the things that I think we need to consider more when coming up with solutions and practical ways to solve this issue is to think about how we can endorse different culturally conscious mental health practices so that when someone comes in, they feel like something that responds to their cultural norms is going to be in their office waiting for them, right? When you see a psychologist, you don't just want to get the run-of-the-mill, tell me how you feel. If there are other values and ideas that you want to be thinking about.
Definitely, that's awesome.
It is. It's important. There's a lot of work going on at the moment in the mental health space in New Zealand.
Absolutely.
The likes of Mike King, Voices of Hope. There's a lot of work going on.
Yeah.
I was having a conversation a couple of days ago about it, and it's quite a big difference, I think, where New Zealand's at the moment between advocacy and a lot of people talking about there needs to be a change, but there's very few people and organisations that are out there doing the do and actually making that ground level change of not just saying we need to stand up and talk, but going out and talking. You know,
Absolutely.
going to the schools, going to these young communities and going, let's talk about this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I think is really important. We'll touch on that a little bit later, but I'm keen to hear a little bit more about the India journey. We talked about it a little bit off camera for the viewers, so I'm kind of keen to retouch on that and hear a little bit more about why were you in India, what did you do in India, what were the big shifts in your mind that happened in India and all that sort of things.
Yeah, you got it. So the premise of the entire program is for New Zealand students to go to India and reimagine India, reimagine the entire place. The goal, the notion behind the whole thing is to address the fact that what we as New Zealanders assume or consume from the media about what India is, what's going on there, is a very small part of a very big picture. So the New Zealand government's kind enough to send a group of students over to get a very holistic perspective on what India is comprised of, economically, socially, culturally, spiritually speaking. So we went through an incredible experience over 26 days for me personally. We visited Flipkart, which was basically a sort of Amazon equivalent in India, which was recently acquired by Walmart because Walmart wasn't able to set up its own franchise, Walmart in India. So the natural response was to buy one of the biggest companies that exists so that they can dominate the market. Yeah, naturally. And we were lucky enough to speak to some of the really awesome staff that managed that acquisition, and we talked a bit about sustainability. We talked about the aspirations. I wouldn't say that they're achievements, but they're aspirations in supporting the small businesses that would naturally be getting taken out of the running when there's such an easy and efficient option like Flipkart. Another place I went to was Mu Sigma, which was a consulting agency. It was really, really funny. We were about 2 hours into this discussion, and they were talking to us about this case they did where they were working with a pharmaceutical industry company that was dealing with anti-cancer drugs. They found a consistent side effect to those drugs, and so they created another product to respond and address that side effect. So capitalizing on the problem that they caused, and they sort of showed it to us, and they're like, so what we did was shuffle the cards and discipline all the people that were involved and complicit, but we made sure there was no legal action. And they obviously didn't really understand how morally conscious New Zealanders are. I feel like they've told that story before, and maybe it hasn't had such a vicious response, but the New Zealanders were just like, you can't do that. How can you morally justify that? So what was really cool to me was the fact that New Zealanders, even in a corporate setting, even in a setting where naturally you're trying to come across as an approachable, someone you can add on LinkedIn after, we were ready to ask the hard questions. And that was something that struck me. And it was a real theme of the whole India trip, actually, was New Zealanders staying true to their identity and tackling things with that perspective, but also being open-minded.
It's important. So I just want to touch on one thing you mentioned before, to do with that identity, mental health, that whole kind of story. And you touched on the media consumption.
Yeah, man.
With the way the world's moving, obviously this is live on social media now. This is kind of a new age thing, and streaming live and podcasts and all that sort of thing. It hasn't been around for many, many years. It's been around for 5, 6, 7 years, but not years and years. And I think, especially with young people, what is media consumption today doing to a lot of young people, and what kind of picture is that painting in a lot of young people's minds, do you think, of how they need to be or be perceived or look to their peers and maybe people up the food chain or whatever?
Yeah, sure. Well, we've all heard the narrative before, right? That Instagram, Facebook, it's a orchestrated picture, which gives us an idealized sense of what a person's life is like. And even though we all, claim to know that doesn't stop us from continuing to curate our own lives and to compare the things that we put up and what we're doing when we're not on Facebook to the people that are posting the beach pictures or the travels overseas. I was guilty of this. When I was traveling overseas, I had this unconscious desire to go, wow, look at all these things that I'm learning. Let me share it with all of these people. But what I realized is, in a sense, that's feeding into a narrative of inherent comparison. And if there are things that I want to share, maybe I should be saving those for the meaningful discussions with like-minded people and friends. And on the whole, that's what I've tried to do. Of course, you post a few things just to let the family know you're still alive. Yeah. But I think media consumption has a real capacity to do good. I'm playing devil's advocate in a sense there, because I know that there's a level of accessibility to meaningful and positive content, like I hope we will create today, and I'm sure we will. I'm sure we will get into some good stuff. But it's a double-edged sword, and I think conscious consumption of media is one of the most key things that we can do as individuals, and also to help give others around us an awareness of what content might be not safest to consume, but might feed the types of things that we as individuals are looking for at a given time. I think I can justify consumption of media without this feeling of insecurity if I know I'm going into it with a purpose. Yeah. So if I'm looking for a particular lesson to learn, if I'm looking at something on YouTube for a particular reason, I'm interested in something, and I'm not just scrolling through, finding things and coming across a vlog about India that makes me think, oh man, I wish I saw this, or I see a video from a friend and it makes me think, oh man, I wish I went to this or that.
It's that conscious consumerism, right? You're being conscious of what you're consuming and why you're consuming it. Totally. But it's quite interesting as young people. I had a few chats with my mum about this, and them growing up, social media didn't exist, right? Traditional media, TV, right? TV was the only form of media, maybe radio. for consuming news, consuming content, and new things. And obviously, as we get older and our generation gets older and new things are invented and Facebook's brought out and Instagram's brought out and all these sorts of things, it's very hard to stay away, I think, from a lot of this media and a lot of this consumption. I myself have tried. I've tried to detox from social media and go off for a couple of weeks, and you always find yourself going back for whatever reason that may be, whether it be you feel like you're missing out or you don't know what's going on or you want to stay in the loop. And, you know, I always find myself sitting at home telling Grayson, get off your phone. Like, why are you on Instagram all the time, you know? Like, but it's so easy to pull your phone out, Instagram, 2 clicks, and you're seeing everybody else's life.
I think there's definitely levels to it, though. Like, the way I kind of look at it is that if I've got this block of time that I can do whatever I want with, I don't really mind that I use social media for a certain amount of it. It's that when, say I've had to be here at 5 o'clock, right? If I'm also already on social media at 4:20 and 4:30 and 4:40, and that being on social media then makes me late and puts my life behind, then that's when I find the imbalance of how much social media I consume during the day, when it's pushing me back and stuff.
Is there a balance? Is there a fine line of this is acceptable and this is considered too much, or
Well,
you know, like where does that balance? Is there not a balance? I'm not sure. As a young person, how do we, growing up in the world, go, I'm consciously consuming this and I'm not consciously consuming this, and how do you find that balance? Can you?
Well, I like this because we have 3 different perspectives. We have sort of this advocacy and sort of a middle ground. We're finding this cool exchange, and I think that's important to acknowledge, right? Every perspective is valid. I think we don't have a space where there's no room. I don't think there's a dialogue that should say social media shouldn't exist. But that's not to say that we can't reshape what that looks like.
Yeah.
I think as someone who depends on social media for a lot of the opportunities that I encounter, I don't want to shout out and say, hey, this shouldn't happen, right? But I think the other concern that I have, and it's just jumping back to a point that you made, Matt, just about talking about mental health and tying that into media. One of the big issues that I think arises with media consumption and on the inverse production is we talk more than we act. So when the opportunity for advocacy arises, I think it's so important to facilitate meaningful discussion.
100%.
But I think it's very important that we as social media consumers and producers, when we share things, because that's still production, right? You're proliferating a message. When that happens, we need to be explicit about how this manifests in the real world. Like, I'm the hugest fan of Voices of Hope. What Jazz Thornton does. Thornton, I'm your biggest fan.
Massive hero.
Yeah, hard. And same with Mike and all the incredible work that they do. And what I see with those is very practical, meaningful ways of getting on the ground level, right? But they use media to spread their message, to facilitate discussions about what is important. So that they've got a really good marrying of the two, right? And what they do is they encourage meaningful discussion between individuals about what's going on.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that brings me to kind of the next question, is that creative part of it, right? So I'm a consumer of social media. I don't create social media. So I barely ever post. If you check my Instagram, I zero posts. Facebook, maybe once in a blue moon. Grayson, you're pretty similar. But it's interesting now, right? So Grayson and I, always on YouTube, watching creators, watching vloggers, all these sorts of things, right? Filling in the daytime. But I think where a lot of young people, and a lot of us kind of, where that barrier comes in is they're creators. They're creating content, but where we forget is they're building a brand, they're building a business, right? They're not just filming their day and putting it online for fun. They're doing that because they're earning money. Yeah. They need to pay the bills, right? Perfect example, one of the biggest vloggers at the moment, David Dobrik. Take him for example, right? Watch it all the time. He's a businessman. Full stop. Very good one. Full stop, very right? Good. Makes millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Millions and millions of dollars, and the way he makes his money is by filming these vlogs.
Yeah.
What does that do to that creator as a young person? He's 23, 24 years old. What does that do to him from a mental health perspective, from a well-being perspective, from a balance perspective of, you're building a business and you're building a life for yourself, but every single second is documented. Everything is open to the public, right? He gets randoms turning up to his door, right? And then bringing that back a step is, my sister's a creator online, right? She runs her own business. She posts things on social media. She's not quite obviously as famous, but at the end of the day, she's still a creator like that, right? She's still posting online, updating her fans, her followers, all these sorts of things. Still can take a toll on you because at the end of the day, you're consciously going, I need to take a photo of my outfit and post it online because that's what my followers want to see. Or I need to do this because this is what these people want. What does that do to a human psychologically, knowing that you think as a young person do I want to share my whole life?
Yeah.
And what points don't I share? Do I share my really cool new dog that I just bought, but not share the fight I had with my parents? You know what I mean? And then it paints that really dark picture of, I'm only going to show you the best things because I want you to like me. Yeah. What does that do to a young person or any person?
Yeah, totally. Well, you use the word psychologically, so I can call upon my study with that. But before that, I think when you use the example of David Dobrik, I think the biggest thing that comes to mind is desensitization, right? So the experiences that you have these amazing pieces of content which are vehicles for your growth, right? But I've never seen someone so like indifferent about giving your best mate a Lamborghini.
Totally.
You know? Like,
is that healthy?
I don't think it is. I think, but again, that because we're seeing such a selective picture, we don't know about the little things that really get David Dobrik going. We don't see the things that make him happy, if there are any things. Where is his mental health at? We don't see these things, and the sort of tragic part of that, I feel, is because it is that you establish so much of a brand that you can't deviate in ways that become more meaningful for you as you grow, right? So you become a David Dobrik and you're incredibly successful. So you can't pivot when you need to, right? I think a really good example of someone who succeeded in doing that is PewDiePie. I've watched some really interesting articles.
Just on the YouTube train today?
Yeah, it's interesting we go down this route because, and again, talking about irresponsible media consumption, if ever there was a day where I had nothing on, I was feeling like crap, and I just wanted to totally zone out. This is where I'd go. Totally. I'd let my YouTube recommended, take me away.
I think a lot of young people are today. Finish school, go home, YouTube's on.
Exactly.
Because they feel like they know these people. Their life is on show. I know what PewDiePie's doing. I was at his wedding. I could watch the video. I feel like I know the person.
Yeah, we feel
exactly.
But I think.
But it's not real feel, right?
Yeah,
it's not real emotion.
More often than not, it's insincere. Yeah, for sure. But I like this. We're talking about that sort of informality. Like, I mean, in the whole essence of this podcast. We're just rocking in, sitting down, having a good discussion, a good korero about what's important. And when a successful content creator creates a brand, it takes a lot of courage to say, this isn't who I am anymore and I need to do what's healthy for me, right? Like what PewDiePie used to, just make gaming videos. And then one day he was like, actually, I just want to talk, or I want to react to all the things you guys have said about all the stuff I've already done. So that's, to me, speaking more to his appreciation of the community that he's already created, and who could have known, but that was even more successful than his gaming, right? What he was able to do was talk about the things that his fans were creating, and people loved that even more. So people wanted to be more fans because there was this idea that there was a back and forth interaction. That feels more sincere to me. This feels like a back and forth, right? You don't see that back and forth with David. You see, he throws like, I don't know, keys to a free car into a crowd, or a bunch of tickets or something like that, right? There's no back and forth. There's no like, what are you going to do after this? How do you feel?
And do you think as a consumer, majority of consumers would perceive that different? And what effect does that have on the way I see content creation, or the way I see these people building their own personal brand?
I think sometimes it doesn't have as much of an effect, or perhaps not as much of an effect as it should, because the fact is, we look at David Dobrik, we're not inherently thinking this is a skit, this isn't real. We're thinking, wow, look how magic this life is that he's leading. And even if we know, subconsciously, even if we've seen like a press release that says, I don't know, David Dobrik's, not feeling good, he's, been seen super upset, or, had a fight or broken up with someone, whatever it is, you go back to the next video and you think, wow, this is real.
Yeah.
and that's not to say that it isn't, but again, we're coming back to that point of mental well-being in the face of constant curation. And what you mentioned before about, okay, well, I share all of my life. Does that mean I share all of the good and all of the bad? Do I share, a close friend's funeral, or do I share the new shoes I bought, or do I share both? And that's a sort of full circle for me in terms of this conversation, because I don't feel like many viewers are willing to accept both.
Totally.
So do you think a big part of mental health on social media is finding yourself before you kind of project your brand and putting it on social media?
Yeah, but I think also the community of content creation is often so cutthroat that if you spend that time thinking, you're not the one that makes it through.
You fall behind, right?
Yeah.
I think it's interesting you bring that up. One of my favorite content creators online, a New Zealander by the name of Jessica Quinn, I believe it is. Jessica Quinn, I think. Mental health advocate.
Cool.
Amazing woman. Follow her on Instagram. Amputee at a very young age. So very, very young. Lost her leg to cancer. Her content is raw. It's the best. It's I'm moving to LA. I'm doing this. I'm succeeding. I'm a model. I'm doing this. But it's also 10 o'clock in bed showing her foot swollen because her new amputee piece doesn't fit well. And it's showing this is the glamorous side of my life. That's amazing. And everybody should thrive. And this is great. But also, hey guys, behind closed doors, it's fucking shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Excuse my language, but it's shit. We have the hard days. We've got the good days, which I'm going to show you, but I'm going to show you the bad days because at the end of the day, those come. And I think it's really interesting that a lot of content creators up and coming, whether that be through anything, and I want to include in this business. So people that are starting businesses, young people, right? You've started a business. We've both had our experiences with entrepreneurship. A lot of our friends, they want to share the good. They want to share I just signed $1 million contract. I just raised $5 million. Look what I've just done. How many of those turn around and go, I just lost $1 million contract. I've just gone bankrupt. I had to sell my house.
Totally.
If they did that, what does that then do to the young people of New Zealand? And does that change their perception of business and content creation or, of all of these things and go, that seems a little bit more me? Is that a little bit more relatable to go, I also have done some of that stuff, so I relate to them more? Would that help them propel? You know what I mean? What does that do to a young person when we're only seeing the glamour? And it's an interesting discussion, I think.
I definitely agree, and I think you could even simplify it more. Think of all the crazy niches and types of content that we consume, right? People consume people eating, and eating it really close to a microphone.
Bit of ASMR.
Yeah,
Love it.
Love some noodle ASMR, but with that sense of how creative niches, is it so infeasible that we can create a niche for contrasting, like strong, honest content. I don't think it's an obstacle in terms of people inherently don't want to consume that content. I think it's an obstacle of there is a macro level ego between us and making that an established norm. Yeah,
it's interesting. Okay, I'm just going to divert a little bit.
Yeah,
bring us on to our next topic.
Let's do it. Can I just say this is a good vibe. I'm loving the surfboard
good setup.
We
table.
had a few issues with the TV there, but I ended up just turning it around.
Yeah, we were trying to show Zak's website for his Youth Arts New Zealand, which we'll talk on soon. But
The TV went down, not the website.
I want to touch a little bit on. We talked off camera, which I really want to talk about on this because I think it's really important with the work you're doing around your creative writing in prisons. So do you want to give us a little bit of a recap about what you're doing and why that's important? Why is the work you're doing so important to you, and why do you want to do that? Not many people would go out and say, I'm going to teach creative writing in one of the most dangerous prisons in New Zealand.
Sure.
Why is that something you're going, fuck that, I'm doing it?
Sure, absolutely. So the two words that come to mind are creative equity, right? So
What does that mean?
So it means every young New Zealander in Aotearoa is able to find a platform to express themselves and hopefully, tying back into our conversation, use that as a vehicle to explore and improve their own mental well-being. So naturally, when you're thinking about environments and spaces, first and foremost, which lack platforms for creative expression and have a bunch of at-risk youth that could benefit from a culturally conscious, compassionate, empathetic space where they can speak about their experiences, speak about something hypothetical, write something down, come up with a rap, whatever it may be. So flexibility is key here. What we want to do is create a space in which that feels okay. And when you're in a prison setting, because I've spent a bit of time in these spaces, that's not something that you feel is allowed or comes naturally, right? So this idea came out of some really surreal circumstances. I was just lucky enough to run into somebody for a separate program, and this was for rehabilitation centers, and they happened to see that I was a creative writer. So creative writing's my passionate pursuit, right? So ever since I was 12 years old.
You're writing a book, I believe?
Yeah, man.
How's that going?
It's going good. I think, as you grow and as you learn, you really want to, change what you express and how you get it across. But I'm actually watching a Neil Gaiman masterclass at the moment just to see what writing for young people's like. Because tying again to the whole theme of young people, opportunities for young people, creative opportunities for young people, that's my passion. But when it comes to young adult fiction, you have this ability to sustain positive impact, right? Because you're targeting an audience that has a lot of malleability, emotionally, socially, spiritually. And that's the same attitude that we take into the prisons. This idea that offering a platform for creative expression in a space that in which this could stand to have really positive impact, given our rangatahi have been in positions in which they may not have had the opportunity to sit and get some of their feelings out into the open, and to feel like there's an open dialogue in which they can be honest, and if they're willing to actually share these things with not only facilitators but with each other, and then create that sense of community.
So what kind of mindset do the rangatahi in the prisons have already about creative writing? Are they really wanting to get into it? Or there's probably some people who would argue that they're not really interested in creative writing.
Yeah, sure.
Or, schooling at all,
Or
right?
schooling,
yeah, absolutely.
Which is not necessarily their fault, right?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So you got to, it's super important for us to keep in mind as we go in that many of the inmates that we'll be working with don't have the ability to read or to write. But that is almost all the more reason for us to be there.
And these inmates are 15, 16, older, right? And they just were never taught that, or regardless of circumstance, they just don't know.
Well, for a number of reasons and experiences, different opportunities, stratification of opportunity is one of the hugest issues that we face, and so offering that opportunity to express, but in a way that transcends these things that have been presented as obstacles, up until now. So if we're in a space where a young person wants to speak about their experiences, we're doing a word storming exercise, or we're asking people to finish sentences like I am, I wonder, I dream. Creating a space where they can say those things, we transcribe them. Or if they want to express that musically, that's something that we want to cater for too. And the idea at the end of the day is to this is a big aspiration for me, is to create an anthology of the inmates' work, so that we not only validate their experiences, we show them that their perspectives are something that a large number of people can relate to, engage with, and appreciate, so that they feel compassionately understood. But we also want to use that as a vehicle to show people that creative writing can be a vehicle for continued self-expression and emotional consciousness as you transition back into the community. I feel like, personally, creative writing has been such a huge asset to my ability to understand myself, and even if we can offer a fraction of that ability to reflect on the values and consciousness that a young person wants to have and wants to feel, then we're doing something good, right?
I think it's important, right? It's that validation of you're at the end of the day, you're a human being, right? You were, regardless of circumstance you were born into, you were raised, however life progressed that you ended up where you are, at the end of the day, you're a human being, and you have just as much right to experience this world and the experiences and opportunities that are out there as I do.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we got to understand as well is the circumstances in which these young people find themselves in the present. We can't look at these in isolation, right? So we need to look at the social structures, social issues which place young people in positions of hardship, which lead to crime or to emotional strain that leads to terrible outcomes.
Totally.
When we're trying to make sense of these experiences, and we're trying to reflect on anything that a young person or anyone for that matter does incorrectly or does something, whenever someone does something that they regret, we want a vehicle or a platform to make sense of that, right? And also to understand the situation and circumstances which put us in that space. So for us, the creative writing and its function in a prison setting is also about allowing young people to understand that the blame isn't entirely it's never located in one place.
Totally.
Not to say it's within someone or outside anywhere. It's speaking to something bigger. And I think this is the exact same principle that we should be applying to mental well-being.
I agree 100%.
Hey, we're on the same page, man.
We're on the same wavelength.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Blame. I wholeheartedly believe that regardless of circumstance, blame should never be placed entirely on one person. Mm-hmm. There's always a number of cause and effects that go into things. Mm-hmm. And there's always a number of circumstances that lead to a greater circumstance that, there's always a chance to do better, and there's always a chance to stop the worst thing happening, right? And that's from a collective of people and organizations and communities to gather around these people.
But even that's so relative, right? One of the terms that we use in sociology is the sociological imagination, right? So to understand what is right or to understand what the worst thing is, we have to assume that our perspective is objective, and that's not correct. That's something else that I learned in India. Yeah. You have a spectrum of truth that relates to any and all issues, and I personally used to have the belief that there's some parts of that spectrum that are more true than others, and I think true empathy means understanding that every part of that spectrum is 100% true to someone, and when you apply that with a sociological mindset or imagination, what you see is that these young people, of course, they deserve a space for reflection and a creative platform to make a lighthearted commentary on how they feel. Doesn't have to have anything to do with how they got here, where they're going, the past, the present, the future. It doesn't have to be anything. But expression in and of itself is something that we can all inherently relate to.
How important is that? How important is expression? Expression of oneself. And knowing, we talked a bit about this before, is knowing who you are in order to express that at the truest level. We talked about before, again, off camera. Sorry, we did a bit of talking off camera.
Next time.
How, am I an introvert or am I an extrovert? You asked.
Yeah.
And my response to you was, doing these sorts of things, happy to be an extrovert. Happy to talk to people. Always happy to talk to people, start conversations, love that sort of thing. Love social environments. But also very happy to go home and sit in front of my computer and not talk to anybody for 3 days, right? And the reasoning for that is...
And it does happen.
And it does happen. Greyson comes in, get out. And it's that understanding of, I don't truly understand who I am yet, right? And that's on a number of things, right? That can be, for a lot of young people, that's sexuality, that's spirituality, that's what do you want to do? Who do you want to become? What are your values? What are your morals? A wide range of things of understanding who you are. And I think it's, in order to become truly great, you need to really understand who you are. And not many people get to that point.
Yeah.
But how important is it to start that discovery of who you are? And once you really start to hone in on who am I, what kind of doors open up?
Man, well, I think the first thing that comes to mind is redefining great. I think if you personally, and this is a
No.
generalization as well, but if you have the same version of great when you realize you're great as you did when you start out, there's something wrong.
It's a constant change, right?
Yeah, totally. And I think one of the things that individuals are often insecure about or not brave enough to admit, again, generalization, but the fact that sometimes the version of great that you have now was what your old version of great would consider going in the opposite direction.
So what has great? How's the word great changed for you over the last 5-10 years?
Well, I can tell you how the concept of greats changed in the last 2 weeks, man.
Do it.
Yeah. Glad you asked that question, my man.
Now,
so for me, the time I spent in India drew back the curtains on how important calmness, family is to me. So when I say calmness and family, they're kind of linked to me. So historically, I've felt, and this is breaking the wall here. Personally, this isn't something I typically share, but I've often felt a responsibility to make the best I can on the opportunities that I've been posed in the spirit of respecting the sacrifices that my family made. But often that's come at the cost of actually being immersed in the family dynamics that my family would prefer I'm at.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's something that has been a tension for me for a very long time. Right from school, like creative writing even, like I was like, hey, I'm going to be the next big author. My brother would be like, yo, come to Murawai, have some beers. And I'd be like, nah, man, I'm about to hit this sweet spot.
Is that internal pressure that comes from my family sacrificed so much and done so much for me to be where I am? I now need to go and achieve greatness in order to give back to them.
Well, that's where the pivot comes, right? So I spent time away in India and realized that the amount of love and compassion that exists there, it transcends aspiration. It transcends sense of self even. So and this is something that's really pertinent and something that I've drawn from my time. I did this incredible Māori studies paper, Te Ao Māori paper, and collectivism is something that really struck me as a platform to more empathetic relationships with my family members. So my family's split, so my mum and my father live separately. So when I went to India, I saw the sense of interdependence and unconditional love that I really should have been seeing here at home all along, because it's not like it doesn't exist. It thrives here, and that's something that we should be incredibly proud of, and it is something that I intend to take the utmost pride in moving forward, 2020 in this decade. And my family is open to that sense of interconnectivity, and so what's important to me is that I make good on that extension of love, because in the same token, I think India has every rule and every exception. I saw so many places where people were isolated, were alone. They were suffering from mental health issues, but also physical health issues, social, abandonment, and all of those things compounding in a space where there is no government structure which is set to, or government, systems in place to, support those people. I went to a place called Jaipur Foot, which offers free limbs to amputees upon entry. So if you walk in, you are guaranteed to walk out with a limb, no charge. And I saw someone who had the legs taken away from them in a machine accident a year before. It took them a year to hear about this hospital. First thing they did, came there. I saw him walk for the first time in a year. And it was just like the most mind-blowing thing to see. And he had no family, no one that was able to support him. And he was willing to extend his love to the people around him, right? He was so kind, like it wasn't the voice or the body language of an individual who was that felt I'm gonna block myself out. He was willing to tell me about his story, and he was asking me things, and I'm like, dude, you've got enough on your plate. How crazy is that?
Why is it that you think we don't have that endless eternal love in New Zealand? We talk about it a lot. We talk about a lot of, New Zealand's this great country to live in. Everybody looks out for each other. Everybody loves each other. But at the end of the day, we've still got the worst suicide rates in New Zealand, in the world. We've still got kids going to school hungry and homeless. We've still got people struggling. Why is it that we, I haven't been to India, but, there's a number of places around the world that you look at and you go, they just endlessly love one another as if they are family.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they treat each other as if you are my brother or you are my sister.
Well, again, I got to raise the point that India is every rule and every exception, and I don't want to make the generalization that, for example, we got to consider the religious tensions that are going on in India at the moment, the riots, the protests in Kashmir, for example. So, love is extremely powerful and extremely pervasive in India, but there's a lot of issues too. But speaking to that eternal love, which I definitely witnessed, I don't want to make the statement that New Zealand doesn't have that eternal love. I think it's bigger than that. How can something be bigger than eternal love, right? But
I think it's definitely there.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely there. How do we bring it out into everything we do?
Well,
how is it that every problem we face it with eternal and endless love for one another?
Sure.
And with that whole statement that we went back at the beginning, go, at the end of the day, you are a human being, and you are a human being, and despite circumstance and opportunity that each other have been given, you still deserve the right to love, the right to be healthy, the right to experience this world that we've been given. And why, and it's, how do we come to that? How do we get to that? How do we get to that I can go, regardless of anything, that guy on Queen Street that's homeless still has the right to every single opportunity that I've been given, despite why he's there. I don't know why he's there. I don't know how he got there. I find myself walking a lot with friends who are always like, oh, he's probably drug addict, don't give him money. If I've got spare change, I'll give him. I don't know why he's there.
Yeah.
He could have had a great home, a great family, and all of a sudden everything slipped under and it was not his fault at all.
Yeah.
And now he has to live on the street.
Yeah.
We don't know. So how do we come to that? How do we bring New Zealand around to be this endless eternal pit of love and go, everybody deserves the right to experience?
Well,
it's a big question.
Yeah, well, I might sidetrack for a second,
Yep.
If that's okay, and then hopefully bring that
No.
around, because I have an amazing story that ties into that. So I was catching the bus to uni one morning, and there was this guy that had been sort of stopped by the cops. He was homeless, and eventually the cops stopped talking to him. I was hopping on the bus, and the guy hopped on, and the bus driver was kind enough to let him go through because he didn't have the money, and he came up, and in the 20-minute drive, or maybe 30-minute drive to uni, the guy told me his life story. He told me about how he'd been in prison since he was 18 years old. He'd recently gotten out. He'd looked to his uncle for a job at a shop, and they turned him down. That was crazy to me. But because of this sense of who this guy was, I won't name him. And he talked about discrimination that he'd faced because he was of Māori descent. He faced, all of these expectations to reintegrate into the community, which at every step were, stopped, obstacles placed in front of him. And I think he had some ancestry from Slovakia. And one day he met an old woman from Slovakia who was kind enough to have a discussion and hear his story. And he told me about how that just broke him down, because it was like for the first time in decades that anyone had been willing to listen and to hear him
treated
out.
him as a human being,
Yeah.
as a person.
Yeah, exactly. We spoke a lot about Māori artifacts which have been kept overseas and haven't been returned, and I could see the tears welling up in his eyes, and I could see this feeling of I just want to do good, and if only I was treated with the same level of empathy as other people who haven't had the same sort of records precede them, then I would be able to make the positive impact, speak about the things that I care about, the same as anyone else.
Why do you think that New Zealand doesn't have that level of eternal love and empathy that, say, India has? Why do you think it's so hard for New Zealanders to open up to that level?
Well, yeah, like just coming back, like to bring that round, like the circumstances that preceded him meant that he wasn't able to, show his love, right? So everyone has love, and there is an obstacle that sometimes prevents us. We're not always loving people. So, there's the question, and the age-old sort of buffer to love is like, oh, if you're not being loving to me, why would I be loving to you?
Yeah.
And so, what it looks like is so holistic that I couldn't even begin to say where it starts, because it doesn't really start anywhere in my belief. It begins with relieving the obstacles between someone and their ability to express themselves, to express love.
Yep.
So I see a brainstorm of everything we've talked about today, and I can see all of them coming into the middle. So at-risk youth in a corrections facility, having the obstacle of not being able to express their thoughts, what we're able to do is offer them a platform for creative expression so that they have a language in which they can express their love, right? If we look at consumption, we have people who have a brand which is extremely, popular and powerful, but if it's giving your mates Lamborghinis and partying all the time, you've got this barrier between you and being able to express the love that you want to give. If you want to give it, you might not. But if we lift that, it's the same. Same with production of, social media and advocacy, right? We're trying to show that love. We're trying to be as compassionate as we can, but it's all about manifesting that in action, right? And sometimes it's a cause for insecurity when we have to act on something, right? So, people who strike for climate are incredibly empowered and engaged. And that's not to say that the people who post about climate change on social media aren't. But I think there's an important step that gets taken. There's a level of, I'm going to physically manifest this belief that I have for eternal love.
Yeah.
So there's all of these little levers that we need to switch, these little doors that we need to open up. And again, you can't say where that begins, where that ends. That was a big question that you asked. I tried to give it my best shot.
You've done a job for us. You've recapped the whole thing.
You got it.
I think where I see it all coming back in is, for me, it all comes back to that initial thing, right? Is as early as you possibly can, start that journey of self-discovery of who you are.
Yeah.
Once you know who you are in terms of your values, your beliefs, whether that be spiritual, non-spiritual, whatever that is, what do you ultimately believe in, and what world do you want to see? And if you can tell yourself, what do I believe in, and what world do I want to see, and do I want my children or my family or my friends to see and to be involved in and experience, you're on that right step. Because then at the end of the day, like you said, that everybody's born the same, right? We're all born with that unknowingness of what is this world. So that love is there, right?
Man.
That love is there. And if you start that journey of discovery there, you're going to want everybody to experience this perfect world that you've transcribed. So you'll show that endless amount of love, because you'll go, my truest self would not want anybody to have any mental health issues. I wouldn't want anybody to have, nobody to be homeless, right? I'm showing that endless love. I want everybody to experience the things I've done.
You think everyone feels that way?
I would like to think so. I don't think so. But I think it's like you said, it's those levers that we need to pull to allow people to express themselves, to show what their version of the world what they want their version of the world to be.
Yeah, sure.
Right? My version of the world is very different to what your version of the world is.
Totally.
Right? And your version of the world is going to be very different to an at-risk youth that's sitting in jail right now that you're about to go and do creative writing with. His version of the world will be way different to my grandmother's version of the world. Right? But if we all have our unique versions of the world, that love will show through. I truly believe that love will show through.
It's interesting to talk about that. Like I would love to think so too, right? But what I acknowledge is the fact that what we understand as good fortune or good things coming our way because we deserve them are often things that come at the cost of other individuals. Totally. But we receive that, and we receive that without guilt on the premise that we are receiving the love that we think we deserve. So what I mean by that is like,
but it's that endless love, right? If you know, I mean, hard to say what I'm trying to say, I guess, but it's that thing, I guess, you know, if multiple friends that say this, and lots of friends are big advocates of this, but it's that give endlessly with no expectation of receivement.
totally
Right? So I'm going to give you everything I possibly can in my soul. I'm going to give you all the love. I'm going to give you everything I can. And that doesn't mean I'm going to go broke doing it, because I still need to live and I still need to be at peace.
Yeah.
But I'm going to give you everything I possibly can of myself with no expectation that I'm going to get anything back from you.
And I think that's what true love is, right?
I agree.
I had a really awesome, deep and meaningful on this exact topic with someone we both know, Gabriella. On what?
Shout out.
Yeah, shout out Gabriella Brain. But our discussion we had at like 1 a.m. in the morning. I was like wandering it was just on Messenger. I was like wandering the streets.
Yeah.
Under the streetlights, just like thinking, what is love? You know.
Totally.
And we talked about that exact idea, like. Authentic love is love that expects nothing in return, I believe. But I don't think that stops individuals from collapsing the scale or the ambition of their love so that they can receive, you know, substitute love. Like if I go back to Mu Sigma, the consulting agency that I was talking about, right? They have success. Everyone there they have really awesome facilities that care for you know, their workers, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think because of what or maybe thinking about that pharmaceutical company even, right? Is their love so eternal that they don't want anyone to have cancer? Or do they feel that in order to receive the love that, and this is a genuine question, I'm not saying they do or they don't, this is not an accusation at all, but I'm just curious, like, do you feel like they receive the success because and they receive this gratification because they feel like they're doing a good deed, but they wouldn't be showing that, they wouldn't be showing that assistance, they wouldn't be getting that gratification in turn if that
Totally.
if cancer was eradicated. So, you know, love gets manifested in ways that sometimes cause issues.
Yeah.
It's a real weird abstract.
Love is a very double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think we all feel that, you know, it's a beautiful, passionate thing, but you know, sometimes it can cause pain.
Totally.
But maybe, you know, we're talking about it, it's like if everyone loved eternally, then maybe there wouldn't be issues.
The world would be a different place.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we're almost at time. We'll wrap up this.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a good,
Man, that went like
big
by.
turnaround.
Definitely.
Went by very quick.
Very quick.
Talked about a lot of issues.
Yeah, it was nice to draw them all together with this whole eternal love. I think that's a real
I think that's how
nice
we
thing.
rounded it out, right?
Yep. I'm happy.
Eternal endless love.
We're going to end on a quick thing. We're going to do with everybody on the show.
Yeah, you got it.
I haven't actually told Grayson we're doing this. So
I had one
on
up
the
my
fly.
sleeve too, so I'm not sure what you're going to do.
Okay. My big one
Two
is
things.
it's a 3-3-3.
Oh, that's exactly what I was going to do.
We're sold.
We talked
Stop
about
it, guys.
Talked
It's
about it in the
adorable.
car.
Yeah.
3 big things. 3 things that you succeeded in this week.
Yes.
3 things you failed in this week, and the 3 big goals for next week.
Yes.
Whoa.
So it's a big 3-3-3, and it's holding yourself accountable. So everybody listening to this will know what you did well this week, what you're proud of. 3 things that you failed miserably at. Holding yourself accountable for those failures. And what are your 3 big goals for next week?
Great.
Hit me.
I love this.
And I'll add to that. And you have to update people on how you went.
Hey, yeah.
1 week's time, you share this podcast, and you update how did those goals go.
Yeah.
You
And
got
we
it.
start the train of people holding themselves accountable.
You got it.
That's what we want. We want people holding themselves accountable of what did you do well? Celebrate the wins. We want people to celebrate the wins. What did you fail at? Let people know. Be authentic with your creation, right?
Cool.
Like we talked about.
Yeah.
And your 3 big goals.
Yeah.
Become your true self. Know who you are. And what are the 3 big goals?
Oh,
Hit me.
Hit us.
This is magic, man. I love it. Okay, so number 1 is I succeeded in performing a piece of poetry to a close friend that I'm not used to sharing. It was nice to,
Beautiful.
and you know, in the theme of everything we've been talking about, it felt like the right thing to do, and it was about my childhood home, so it was really nice to reflect on it. Beautiful experience. Number 2, good thing that happened this week. I think something that I succeeded at, something that, you know, a win is being spontaneous, grooving, right?
Nice.
I just
This was very spontaneous, by the way.
Yeah. So 2 hours ago, I had no idea I was, coming in to do this, and we're here. I just sort of got to just flick the message.
Yeah.
I'm here with my shoes that I haven't worn since I was in India, so they're just covered in like Indian dirt. I'm just rocking along, having a good time, and I appreciate that spontaneity. It's a good time. Number 3, calm.
Nice.
I've been calm. I've been able to, everyone says the whole deep breath, let it out. I haven't really felt like that's worked for me my whole life until this week. Like I can breathe out and everything actually leaves my mind. It's a real beautiful feeling. So that's a win.
Definitely.
That's something that's come out of my time in India. So or just my time with loved ones coming back, because you're never more grateful than when you see your family after a long time. Yeah. Okay. Things I failed at. I love this. Things I failed at. I failed at sharing time with my family in a conscious, open way. So like I had things I wanted to do. I had things I was scheduling. So I wasn't as open with my time. So, my mum was keen to go for a walk, and I was like, oh, I got to do this first. I got to do that first. And, sometimes you just want to drop things for your family and go straight into it. And we did. We went for a walk. We took the dogs without leads. It was great. And they like ran all over the place. It was adorable. And my dog thinks all grass is a ball. So he just like eats the whole thing. It's good stuff.
Love that.
Another thing I failed at. I think I failed at being patient with some of my goals. So I had a goal to head to the beach. I have this thing. I have a gratitude calendar every year. And I write in it every day. But I didn't take it to India or overseas or anything like that because I didn't want to lose it, right? So I was going to catch everything up, write it all down. And I was like itching to go. So I was like, called up my dad, like, hey Dad, you wanna hang out? I'm like keen to go to the beach. He's like, yeah, I've just got a few things to do first. I was like, okay, when are you keen? And really, sometimes you have goals, but they could have waited, And eventually I got to catch up with my dad, and we had an amazing time. And it's not like I put him out of his way necessarily, but didn't even have to put the energy or the pressure there. You could have just gone, hey, when you're ready.
Yeah.
I'm noticing a sort of family theme here.
Yeah.
It's good. How many of
One more failure.
One more failure. All right. Failure is to a failure this week. To code data properly. I've been coding the themes. I'm doing a project for the university. I'm coding what young people want to be when they grow up, and I had assumptions about like what certain things meant. Like if they said they wanted to be a dog handler, I thought, wow, you want to like handle dogs, it's cool. But what I realized is what they're referring to is police dog handling, and that was in the schools that was common knowledge.
Yeah.
Just a honest mistake.
That's great.
Easy. Goals for next week.
Hit me. 3 big goals.
All right. Goals for next week. Change the world. No.
Change the world in poverty.
Hey, first goal is to share this in a week and tell everyone how these have gone.
That's what I like to
It's
hear.
great. My second goal, because I'm inspired by this table, is to go for a surf. Beautiful. I haven't been in the water with a board this year, and it feels like an injustice.
Yes.
So, yeah, Matt, what do you?
We might have to come catch some waves. Yeah.
that's the one.
Let's do it.
So, are we done?
Let's do it.
That's cool.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Speaking of, Gabriella will be keen for a surf. So
Let's do it.
we'll go. So
have you ever surfed before, Matt?
I've got 2 left.
That's where we've forgotten to make the link.
Yeah, I've got 2 left. I'll watch. I'll film.
Hey.
One more failure.
I was gonna make a good old fashioned like our level joke, but hey, we'll save that for after the podcast.
One more failure.
Yeah. One more failure is to one more goal. You mean?
One more goal. Sorry. One more goal.
One more goal is to be as optimistic as I can. I think
Beautiful.
It's just eternal love.
Eternal love,
Awesome.
baby.
Hey.
Well, I hope to hear in 1 week different. Anybody listening, how can they get a hold of you? If anyone wants to chat, where do they follow you? Email, text, anything? How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, hit me up, zak@youtharts.co.nz if you have any queries or anything. If you want to talk about your creative story, or if there's any way you want to help the creative expression of young people in New Zealand, feel free to hit me up. Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, all the normal stuff. Zak is Z-A-K, spelled the cool way.
Spelled the cool way.
way.
Beautiful. Okay, well, thank you everybody for listening to the
Awesome.
first podcast.
Hope it went well. I think it was a very good first podcast. We're definitely
We're in.
We're a bit 50-50 on coming in and doing it, but no, I think it was really good.
Hey, it was an absolute pleasure, and I think we
Thank
talked
you.
about some
Thank you
real
for coming
cool
along.
stuff.
It's good
Do
to
appreciate
have
it. Thank you guys, and we'll see you
Awesome.
next week.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you.